Sweden in 1883, and she came over to this country in 1902. Yeah.
At the age of 17.
At age 17, and she went through Boston, and I understand from Boston to Jamestown. And I understand that she was sponsored by some itinerant Baptist preacher who, some say, accompanied her, and I thought he just made the arrangements. I really don't know. And when she came to Jamestown, she worked for actually 10 years in various homes in Jamestown, first as a maid and then as a cook.
But now, you had mentioned before that over in Sweden, the reason she came over here was that they were Baptists?
They were Baptists, and they were the only Baptist family in this community, and were almost treated as outcasts. And I was told that the Erickson boys were always getting in fights with others because they were sort of outcasts in a way, because they were going against the tide, just like a communist cell, I guess, in a democracy that people will look down on. But
and Mother was the oldest.
Mother was the oldest of a family that had 12 children, but I understand a couple of them died in the meantime, and she told me, as I recall, that one of the reasons for coming over that she was tired of working so hard, you know, to help take care of all these children. And of course, all teenagers, they want to break that umbilical cord and migrate, I think, and get on their own. So she apparently was an independent soul.
She came by herself?
This I thought, until you mentioned that she went with a preacher. But,
yeah, well, I don't know. I thought either she went with the minister or maybe the minister.
I had the impression that the minister arranged her the passage and told her that she'd be welcome in Jamestown at the Baptist Church, and that they would see that she got taken care of.
But otherwise, she didn't come with anybody. I mean, she was all alone. She didn't know anybody over here or anything. So that's quite.
What did she do when she arrived in Jamestown?
She went to work for people in her homes as a maid and as a cook, and she had many fond memories of those days because the people she worked for, I guess, liked her, and she used to tell about the man of the house coming down in the kitchen and spending a lot of time, I guess, teaching her things. She helped teach her the English language. And,
she learned the English language.
And also they taught her to cook.
Yeah.
So she apparently had not an unpleasant experience in those days.
Now, did she gravitate right to the Baptist church when she first got here?
She gravitated right to the Baptist church, and
well, in those days too, the minister and them would go down. The church would go down to the train station, and from what I gather, and pick up these young people that came over from Sweden, and then take them to the church, and that so that they felt at home in America, because they could talk Swedish, what Swedes were here, and they did this, and this is how the church grew at that time too, because they would go and pick up all the Swedes and then bring them to the church, and the young people's society, you know, really grew at that time, and the church grew because of that.
And then too, because the lack of anything else to do, a lot of the people went to the Salvation Army. And I know my dad used to go to Salvation Army quite a bit. I made a lot of friends there, and I think my mother went too on occasion.
Oh yeah.
So.
Now tell me about your dad and what you know about him before you even came across from Sweden, where he was born, his name.
Well, his his name was Carl Siegfried Carlson, and he grew up in a small, not even a hamlet, I don't think, of our school. You were there, Gladys.
Yeah, well, just out in the country.
Yeah, in the country, right? And,
What's the name?
And I was there. I was there in 1931.
And this is his home, right? It's where he was brought up, right there.
And I was sort of impressed even at that young age of how poor agricultural place it was. Just granite rock, you know, and very few fertile places where they could grow things. And I think he got involved early with helping butchering animals of various kinds, you know, beef cattle and pigs and so forth. And did you see the place where they had the cattle where they?
In back here, that's the slaughterhouse, and they still have the wheel in that slaughterhouse there, that barn where they used to pull the calves up and I guess kill them. So that was really impressive to go back to his home there and see the little stuga where he was brought up and where he learned to start his vocation.
Now, how many children were in his family?
I wasn't really sure about that. I heard various figures around 8. Did you hear that? He had a few brothers that came to this country. Oscar came before he did. And then there was Uncle Robert, who was out on the west coast, up in Spokane way. And
Sandberg.
And the Sandberg was not a
sister.
Oh yeah, Alfield. He had a sister, Alfield, that lived with the Sandberg.
What was Esther's mother's name?
Alfield.
Oh, was it?
Yeah. No, wait a second.
No, that doesn't ring a bell.
Instead of Alfield, well, I think several factors. Many of there were a large number of the young fellows would leave Sweden at the age of 19 to avoid military service. Now, I can't say specifically that my dad did it, but a lot of them did. He, like a lot of them, probably came because they had a better life there than they would in the old country, they thought.
Yeah, they were very poor.
Yeah, and
they were very poor in the old country at that time.
But his intent, apparently, was that he was going to return after 2 years when he saved a little money. But he was injured in a sawmill in what's that place?
Sheffield?
Sheffield, yeah. That it took all his money. There was no workman's compensation those days, and drained him dry, so he didn't get back to the old country until after World War I.
And I think it's interesting. He had his arm. It's the first time that they've ever
well, he
performed a surgery like that on an arm, wasn't it?
Well, when he had this injury in the sawmill, they transferred him to a hospital in Warren, and the surgeon there asked him if he could try a new treatment. And the new treatment consisted of gold screws that were attempted to screw the bone pieces together, and I guess line them up and up your heel. But for years after that, he would get, I guess, abscess in that around his bone and drainage, and you could see many scars where those drainages were accomplished. And after that, he decided that he didn't want to work in the sawmill anymore, and opened up a little restaurant in Sheffield.
I can't picture Daddy having a restaurant,
well,
can you?
I can't either, because
he sure didn't do much in the kitchen at all.
I don't think he knew much about cooking, but he did hire some women who probably knew how to cook, and they were rather rough a group down there, and I would guess you didn't have to put on too fancy a table.
Well, I think they were all the people that worked in the sawmills, so they were really lumbermen that came into the restaurant.
Yeah.
And I remember one time, because he was so honest, one of the, he tells me one of the lumbermen came in, and he had been drinking, and he gave Daddy his whole paycheck for Daddy to keep until he got through the weekend, and then he would, then he picked up the paycheck after that, because he was scared he was going to spend it all on drinking. So Daddy held his money for him until, and they could trust Daddy because he was honest. They knew he was an honest man, so he left his money with Daddy. That's one of the things I remember from the restaurant. I don't, he didn't say
Well,
too
the
much.
other thing apparently that I was told, the Salvation Army had a satellite corps down there, of a few soldiers, and that he used to attend that. And then when he came to Jamestown, he used to go to the corps.
Well,
And
yeah.
and then he met Mother in the Baptist
At the
church.
church here. And I think it's interesting because Lyle's mother said she remembers Daddy coming down to Brookston when the Salvation Army had special meetings down in Brookston.
Is that right?
Yeah, and she says, oh, she remembers when he used to come down there with the Salvation Army, and they would put on those special meetings down there for that little town of Brookston. So it's a small world.
There was a Sheffield where he also started his first butcher shop?
No, Jamestown.
Jamestown?
Right.
So he went from Sheffield back to Jamestown?
Went to Sheffield, to
I don't know if he
Jamestown.
went to Austin
Well,
in between or not.
I understand that when he came through Ellis Island, and then his first stop was Williamsport.
Oh,
And then he apparently worked in various places in that area. I know he mentioned Ludlow, and whether
waiting for Austin.
whether it was Oscar that worked there and Dad, but Oscar and
Yeah, it was in Austin, not
I'm
Ludlow.
talking about okay, Austin.
Yeah.
I really don't know.
Yeah. So, but then when he came to Jamestown, I think he got in touch with this Lindblom and
It worked for him for a while,
worked for
right?
him at the meat market on Cross and, what did we say it was?
That's the Second Street.
Cross and Second Street, yeah. So, and then from there he went, did he go down to the City Public Market then, or did he go over on Fort Avenue?
Oh, no, Foot Avenue didn't come until the 20s.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then it was in 1919 about then, I guess, we got here that.
But something happened before 1919. Didn't he meet some young lass from Sweden?
Your mother?
Yeah.
Oh.
That was, he got married, what year, 1911,
11,
yeah.
yeah.
Did Grandma ever explain how she met him?
You never,
At the Young People's Society at the Swedish Baptist Church is where everybody met their mates. It seems like Ann Seagreed met her husband at the Young People's Society, and Uncle Stain met Aunt Lily at the Young, because all the Swedish people gathered at the church, and that's where they met their future mates. So that's where she met Daddy, I'm sure, at the church there. And Daddy was such a big Baptist that even when he was, they knew him by, what was it, Lyle Baptist Carlson?
Baptist Carlson.
Yeah. So he was known all over Jamestown as Baptist Carlson because he was so active in the Baptist church.
So they got married in 1911, and from there, at that time, where was he working?
He must have been at the City Public Market then. Huh?
no, I think it worked for Lindblom.
For Lindblom then, yeah,
it
because
worked
it
for
was at
Lindblom.
the City Public Market in 1919 here they thought about. So,
Okay. Now, when was Henry born?
1912.
Then came.
And came yours truly, Phil, in 1913. And then Ruth was born in 1915. You want any more dates than that? And,
yeah, and
Sure.
Stanley was, well, we said he died in 33, wasn't it?
and knock off the thing. I
And
gotta figure that.
6 and 30. He was 1917.
1917.
Yeah,
right,
1917. And then Harold, 1922, and then I was born in 1927. So that takes care of all 6 of them.
Phil, as my mother's oldest son, I heard lots of stories about Mom's her birth and how difficult it was. Could you give us a little explanation of sort of what Mom had when she was and the cure, the miracle?
Hearing anything about those difficulties?
I was born too. I think Harold was.
I don't recall that there's any problem at that time.
Okay.
I remember Esther Sandberg took care of you when Mother was in the hospital, and you just loved Esther's meatballs. She used to tell me that. She came over and babysat for you kids while Mother was in the hospital. And she says, I make those good old Swedish meatballs. And you kids loved that. Of course, those days they stayed in the hospital for about, was it 2 weeks? To have the kids, when they had their children,
right?
They stayed in the hospital for 2 weeks, so.
Well, let's talk about, when did you contract spinal meningitis?
I was about, I was in the 2nd grade, so I would have been about 7 years old. 7 years old then. And at that time...
At that time, there were no antibiotics, no antibacterial agents of any kind. The only thing they had was the antiserum. And you probably heard the story of Dr. Blaisdell. He's the only one in town that had a private plane, and he flew to Buffalo for antiserum. And at that time, meningococcus meningitis, which I presume she had, carried about a 33% mortality level.
You were in college at the time, weren't you? Were you in college at the time?
No. When you were 7 years old, you were born 1934.
34.
I wasn't.
Yeah, you were in college at the time. Yeah. And then when Mom and Dad had a rough time because here I was real sick with spinal meningitis, and they put me in a contagion. At that time, they'd stick you in that contagion hospital, and you had to be there for I don't know how many weeks, 6 weeks or something, because they thought it was contagious.
But not to the extent that a lot of the other infections.
Yeah. And then once you got home, you had to lay in bed for weeks. So when I finally they let me come up, I had to learn how to walk all over again because I hadn't been on my feet in so many weeks that I was so weak I couldn't stand up. So you sort of had to learn how to walk all over again after that. But I remember, this is what I remember is Dr. Ballone had told me that it was a power higher than him, because he was the old doctor that treated all of Mom's kids at that time, that it was a power higher than him that healed me. And both he and our family give God the credit for healing me. And so I think that was a healing, an answer to prayer.
Yeah,
it was really an answer to prayer, because everybody prayed for me. I know I've even, when I wrote mentioned it when I was finishing retiring from the church, I mentioned how God had answered prayer, and when I had spinal meningitis. And many of the old-timers said that they remembered how they prayed for me in church and at home. And Dad gathered family together and prayed for me. Harold mentioned that, how Dad gathered all the family together and had prayer.
Well, we're glad they did.
Yeah, you get yourself a nice mother.
Yeah. And he always loved cars. He always had to have a new car.
And then he got a Buick Touring, 7-passenger Touring.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1927, he got a 7-passenger Buick sedan. And he had that until approximately...
Could he have had it at
1935? It could be about that time. And then he got a small car, a Chevy at that time.
Mhm.
It's Depression years. He downsized it to a little bit.
Mhm.
And
I remember that 7-passenger. I thought it was
Yeah.
was a 9-passenger. We always called it.
no,
But
it was
V69.
with seats that folded down.
Yeah.
And
So you sat in the front and the back, and then you had seats in the middle that
Right.
folded down, and you could sit on.
I remember we went to a church meeting one Sunday afternoon, and Stein and what's his wife's name?
Lily.
Lily.
Yeah, Lily.
And mother wasn't with, but Mrs. Carlson, Agda,
Mhm.
and Hank and I, and we had the car full, and the guy pulled out the passage, and Dad, in order to miss it, not have a head-on collision, went to the ditch, and the car flipped over and slid on the roof. And we all were upside down, you might say, and Stein was the most excited of all.
Mhm.
Fortunately, the roof didn't collapse because the framework of the cars in those days was wood.
Oh.
You know, just covered over. So they finally got it tipped up and we go home again. But they didn't travel at 60, 70 miles an hour in those days. On a Sunday afternoon, it was more like 30, 35. So,
He liked to drive fast though when he got in
well,
later years.
if he could, he
Yeah.
would drive fast.
Yeah. And he loved cars.
Well, doesn't everyone?
Yeah, I know. And he always liked to go on trips. And I remember every year we had to go to Niagara Falls. So, right?
Right.
Always, that was his favorite place to go to Niagara Falls every year. And of course, picnics. We always had to go on picnics at least. And then I remember now, this is later on, but he always, Sunday afternoons, he would take a nap. We'd go to church and then if we had company, we always had company for dinner on Sunday too.
Yep.
Because then Mother never knew who she was going to have home for dinner. Because if there was a visiting missionary or a visiting minister, Dad invited them to our house. And so Mother always had a lot of people for Sunday dinner. But then he would take a nap, and then we could go for a ride around the lake or take a ride.
Or to Warren, and there seemed to be one place to stop at a soda fountain.
Oh yeah.
And Dad would always order Moxie.
Oh.
Some people recognize that drink,
Yeah.
old Moxie, M-O-X-I-E.
Mhm. But
Tell me about home. Tell me about what was first home that you remember?
I think we lived down on Water Street, and
I don't know about that.
I have very vague recollections of Dad having a horse and buggy, and we playing in a haymow. But it's very vague. And then we moved up on the Sampson Street.
Well, what about 2 Street? Yeah, I think it was 2 Street.
2th Street, that's what it was.
Yeah, it's not
2
Water
Street.
Street.
It was Water Street that had, I think, its first market. When I've got to look. I think I have an old picture and this market on Water Street. Well, anyway, it was on 2th Street. You're right.
Yeah, it was
And,
2 Street.
There's where he had his buggy.
Mhm. And I think that barn, didn't Hank say that barn was still there, Lyle? On 2 Street there, they still have that
I
little,
think the barn was down, but the house is there, wasn't it?
oh, okay.
And does Hank have a house with the pictures of all the relatives of it on Sampson Street that he has now?
Yeah,
And we moved in there when I was real small, right after the war, about that time. And we lived there until about the time you were born, 1927 or so.
I don't know if Harold was Harold born on Chapman Street?
Said he was.
Yeah.
Okay, Harold was born on Chapman Street, so it must have been before 1922, because Harold was born in 22. So,
If Harold was born 22, he was not born on Chapman Street.
he wasn't?
No.
Okay.
The reason I say that is when we moved to Chapman Street, I went to Fairmount School in the 5th and 6th grade, and 75, I was about 12 years old. So that's about 1925, 26 years.
Okay. Okay. Well, that would be about the time, yeah.
Harold was born on, we lived on
Sampson Street.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that solves that then. he thought he was born on Chapman Street. We'll have to straighten it. He doesn't remember it.
Well, he wouldn't remember being a baby in that.
No.
But,
he.
How long did you live in Chapman for? How long?
We lived from. I'm trying to think.
Well, until I went to college, because I remember when I was in my first year of college, then they moved back to Sampson Street.
Yeah. From
While I was in
about,
college, that would have been 46,
from
45, 46.
I thought we moved to Chapman Street around 27. It was 27, 6 or 27.
Mm-hmm.
And we lived there until past 1939, 1940, because we were living there when I got married. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you.
And when I came from overseas too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was while I was in college, and I
Yeah.
was in college in 46.
Yeah.
And they moved while I was in college.
It was about 1946
Yeah.
then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, and because you lived up on the third floor. He lived up on the third floor
Yeah, there was a parking
when he
lot
was
there.
first married. And Mama used to live up there on the third floor when she lived with us. And that's one thing. We had you probably remember more than I do, but when Aunt Ruth and Aunt Esther came over from Sweden and Mormar, they all came over and stayed, lived at our house.
Not the complete time. They had a little apartment at one time.
Yeah.
But
when they first came,
when they first
they
came,
stayed.
right?
Yeah, they stayed at our house, and then they got an apartment. And there was a big house. It was a nine-room house with an attic that had rooms for Mormar, and 5 bedrooms. Was it 5 bedrooms and then big, huge family kitchen.
They had 5 bedrooms and a full basement.
Yeah.
And we used to have a coal bin, and we heated the house with coal up until, I guess the 30s when they put in the gas heater and the gas.
And I always remember Mama always lived with us, and she couldn't speak English. So we had to learn Swedish because that's the only thing she could speak. And when I think of Momar, I think of her in the kitchen sink because she was always washing dishes in the kitchen sink. She did the dishes after every meal for all the kids. There were so many of us.
And also she would get down on her hands and knees and clean the kitchen floor.
And clean the kitchen floor, yeah. And then when she wasn't cleaning the kitchen floor and washing dishes, then she sat in her rocker up in her bedroom and read her Bible and sang. She'd sing. She always would rock back and forth and read her Bible and sing hymns.
Did you guys go to church a lot?
Yes.
Oh, you can believe it.
All the time. And Daddy used to, and with that 7-passenger Buick, or 9-passenger Buick, he took all the neighborhood kids too. So all the Constantine kids went to Sunday school with us. And the Lynns, I think he was a regular little missionary because all the neighborhood kids went to Sunday school. And he'd make 2, sometimes 3 trips to church, picking up kids and people out in Greenhurst. And he would go all over the city and pick up people and take them to church. So we had to get started early in the morning because he had a couple trips, and then he was Sunday school superintendent on top of it. So.
Yeah, we went to Sunday school, and early when I was young, it was in Swedish. We went to the morning service at 11, and that was Swedish. And then we went to the young people's service at 5, that was in English. But the evening service was in Swedish again, and it was always expected that we attend all those services.
Oh, sure.
And they always served coffee after the young people's meeting, and then they had a sort of a little prayer service at 7, so that those who wanted, to get ready for the evening service could go there. And we went to church.
Yeah.
That was the whole life.
And there wasn't no, do you want to go to church? I mean, that was you had to go to church.
Yeah.
There was no question about, I don't want to go today, you go. And I says, as you can see from the certificates, everybody had perfect attendance. I mean, even Harold and Henry and all of them had perfect attendance at Sunday school. Boy, you were there unless you were deathly sick. So, That was
And-
our life.
And the Carlson children had a reputation of being the noisiest in the Sunday school, I think.
Oh, I think so. Yeah.
And
I know.
biggest cut up.
Huh? Harold, I don't know about you guys because you were a lot older than I was, but I've heard a lot of stories about Harold. He was a little Dickens. They had a hard time with him, but...
Oh, I was just thinking of a little item on Moormore. She learned very little English all those years. And when she was home alone and anybody called and the phone rang, she would raise the receiver and say, "Hello, nobody home, goodbye." and this used to floor a lot of people who didn't understand.
Yeah. But we used to, I think, once to have a telephone in the neighborhood.
That's right. And
so all the neighbors would come over and use our telephone.
This is off camera here.
First, I think
Okay.
Daddy had one of the best, the best known meat market in Jamestown. Wouldn't you say, Phil?
Well, the Dad used to remark, everyone knows CS, and it was true.
Yeah.
And Stanley, like we all did, we worked in the market, you know, on Saturdays and sometimes on other days too, you know, Friday night particularly. And I was away to college my first year, and I think it was around first part of June that he was went out of the market and crossed between parked cars and ran across Forest Avenue, and a car just started up the hill and clipped him. And so he was admitted to what was then Jamestown General with a fractured skull and didn't survive. He died. And I understand he had the reputation of being the only Carlson that had any athletic abilities.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
He played basketball, baseball, and
he was captain of our church baseball team.
And
We've got a picture of him here.
so he had a lot of friends, very personable, and my mother and dad never got over it. But I'm sure this happens in all families, where there's love and so forth.
And he and Walt were just like brothers because Walt was an only child, and
they sort of grew up together.
Yeah, they grew up together, and Walt was always over to our house, and with in fact, our house was a gathering place for everybody.
Yeah.
Remember that? I remember our big front porch. We always used to have kids on that big front porch playing Monopoly and all these Rook and all these games when I was growing up. You get a different perspective because there's quite a few years between Phil and I, so it was different when you were living on Chapman Street than when I was. But
Okay, but how much you, probably for the benefit of everybody,
Well, I met Ethel in around 1940, and she was the used to come in a market and buy some meat occasionally, but my folks knew the family, and her dad had been an officer at the Salvation Army, but had an injury and was working in Art Metal at the time. And so we went together and got engaged at Christmas time, and we married on the 28th May of 41. And we had 2 children, Don born in October 3rd, 43, and Linda February 6th, 46. And Linda has married Larry Beckman, and they have 2 adopted children, John and Brad, currently ages 18 and 16. And Don married Val. He met her in high school in Key West, Florida, and they got married in August of 46. August of, I went to 64, and they have 3 boys at the present time, 18, 20, and 22. And
I just want to say that before Phil went back to med school, after he graduated from college, he taught at Lincoln, and I had him for my teacher.
and my future brother-in-law.
Yeah, that's right. Billy had you for a teacher too, so Ethel's brother had him too. And what was it? Some of the things that happened really funny. Was it your fly was open one time when you were teaching class, and one of the students told you about it, and Phil just very nonchalantly zips up his pants in front of the class and then goes right on talking.
And one time I think I went to school with 1 black shoe, 1 brown shoe.
That's right, because you were in love. You did.
Well, I don't know love. It lived only 4+ blocks from the school.
Yeah, so you walked to school, yeah.
You get up and have a little breakfast and walk to school and go home at noon for a little lunch. It was a very, actually, easy job.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. You had 2 different color shoes on.
Yeah.
And from teaching, where did you go?
I went back to medical school and graduated in 43, and then I went in the Navy. Interned in the Navy, and then I went to sea on a destroyer. Fortunately, the war ended, so I was aboard ship for more than 9 months.
But you were over there when they bombed.
Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Yeah. Oh, that was it.
We were off the coast of Japan at that time. So I don't know how much of my professional career you're interested in.
Very much. That's I've listened to this. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Well, talk about when you were over.
Well, I have one interesting story I like to tell, and that when I was over in Tokyo Bay, I got ordered by dispatch to report by dispatch to conserve pack for further assignment, and I complied with the orders, and then right after that we left Tokyo Bay and escorted a carrier around to Sasebo, and then before we started back for the States, we stopped in Wakayama, and then we ran into a typhoon that used up most of our fuel, so we had to stop in Midway to get refueled. So anyway, when I got back to Pearl, my captain asked me if I wanted to go over to see what's cooking. And I said, if it's okay with you, Captain, I said, I'm going to try and get some leave when I get back to the States. He says, okay, Doc. He says, happy to have you. And so another doctor on the destroyer in my squadron had the same orders I did. His skipper detached, and he got ordered to Okinawa. When I told him what I was doing, it was like pouring a little salt into a wound. And I got back to San Pedro, which is north of San Diego. Make a long story short, they changed my orders, and I went to Bethesda for 6 months. And from there I went to the Naval Hospital, Bainbridge, and I got involved with the Atomic Defense Division of the Navy, and spent 5 years at the Naval Radiological Defense Lab in San Francisco. And then the next 2 years I was on 2 different staffs that planned and ran the atomic bombs in the Weetaki Bikini. So 54, I thought I'd better go back and learn a little more medicine, so I took a residency at the Naval Hospital in St. Albans from 54 to 57, and I subsequently had duty at Naval Hospitals in Pensacola and Key West. And from Key West, I went to what we call Blue Purse, Naval Council Personnel Board, and multiple duties, and stayed there 3 years, and out to Great Lakes for 3 years, and back to my old job in Blue Purse. That's about it.
There's a lot.
Well, you remember, Greg, when we went out to Great Lakes
Great
to
Lake,
see
yeah.
to see Phil out
Yeah.
there, and I thought the most impressive service was that you had the graduation ceremonies for
of the recruits, yeah.
of the recruits. That was really made you so patriotic. You went and just
Well,
We'll talk about Hank.
because you
well,
were about hanging
the
about.
Reverend Edson came as a new pastor, Jamestown from St. Paul, and with him came 3 single girls, really, and Viola was the youngest, and Linnea was the number 2, and she married Walter Carlson. And Elvie was the number 3, and she married, Marker, and they met in church, and they all used to go around together, and of course the older ones they got married first, but Hank got married relatively young, I think,
He must have only been about 21.
about 21,
Yeah.
and
The youngest of all of the Carlson kids, I think, right?
well, Mark got married when he was 20 now.
Hmm?
Mark got married when he was 20.
Oh no, but I mean
Yeah,
of our family, yeah.
And
He
Linda
the-
was 19.
Yeah, I know it. So, and then he worked at the market with Dad, so
Yeah.
he and Dad were partners in the market.
They were very close
Yeah.
for a lifetime. You
Yeah,
might say.
right, because they worked real close in the market together. So,
He had how many children?
of course, he had Tanya,
Yeah, Tanya.
and was born in 1936.
Yeah, and Lynette.
Lynette,
Yeah.
yeah. And Tanya married Dick, and has Jeff and Cheryl. And then Lynette married Denny O'Prey, whose dad was also minister of St. Luke's Episcopal Church. And they have 3 children, Michael, Matthew, and Mark. It's Michael, Mark, and Matthew.
Yeah.
And both Tanya and Lynette had their wedding receptions up at Sunset Bay Manor on the lake, which was real lovely, that they owned at the time. Hank and Linnea owned that, and that was real beautiful receptions up there.
Tell us a little bit about Ruth.
Yeah. Well, Ruth used to go with Wilbur.
When she was a teenager, really.
Yeah.
And then Wilbur married,
Irene Port.
and
Well, when Ruth went to nurses training, so while she was at nurses training, I guess. But then Irene passed away, and then Ruth came back to Jamestown to be a nurse at Jamestown General Hospital, and then Wilbur started looking her up again and started dating her, and they got married shortly after that.
And their children?
Yeah, and then they have Kurt, Adele, well, no, Carol.
Carol, yeah.
Yeah, Carol, Kurt, Adele, and Chris. And don't ask us.
A lot of grandchildren.
Yeah, about all the grandchildren.
And Harold?
And Harold met Janie at Linwood, which you ought to know, because he and Janie visit Linwood every year, every time they come east, where they met.
Where's Linwood?
Linwood's in Ohio, and that was a Middle East Baptist Conference youth camp, and that's where he met her. And she's from Youngstown, and then they were married in Youngstown, and then moved out to St. Paul, Minnesota, and where Harold finished up his seminary training to be a minister in Bethel Seminary. And when I first went out to college there, I spent a lot of time with Harold and Janie. It was kind of nice to have somebody you knew away out there in St. Paul. So they were real good to me when I went to college out there. And let's see, who else? That's it.
And their children?
Oh yeah, and then they had Jimmy, Ronnie, and Julie. And Jimmy and Ronnie are ministers, and Julie is a mother of 2 children. And I guess Ronnie has 2 boys and Jimmy has 3. Baseball games that we used to have in the field over there, and our association with the Greeks over there, I think that's
And then we had a neighbor across the street, Anderson, who was trying to chase us away from them because we made too much noise, or the the ball would fall on his lot, and he was almost spastic about keeping everything just so. And
he'd always call the cops on us neighbor kids.
We
Daddy, your grandfather, but Daddy was always going down to the police station and saying, my kid didn't do this, and he was always reporting the kids between the Constantines and us, and the Carlson kids and them. He was always reporting us to the police. Not me, but my brothers.
No, of course. This didn't include you, did it, Phil?
No, Phil was the good one. I think it was Henry and Harold were the... And whenever Phil got into trouble, wasn't you always had Hank fight for you, or what was the story?
He would fight for me, but he also was an instigator many times.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when we were just before we moved to Chapel Street, and that place by the General Hospital there, we called it sort of sand pit. There wasn't any houses, you know. They what was the name of the kid band that lived on the corner there? But anyway, we would get these wooden boxes, and Hank and his friends would steal a little 2x4s from the lumber yard, which was down that area, and build shacks. And I remember one time they decided they ought to paint, so they swiped some paint out of the Woolworth store. It wasn't the right color, so they sent me back to change it. And I was small. I don't remember much, but they sent me in here.
You got the wrong color.
Yeah, I got the wrong color. Yeah. I don't know if Henry remembers that or not, but
yes, I think he does. Well, then I remember we always used to play. The neighbor kids always used to gather under the street light by our house because the street light, and then we play kick the stick or kick the can or sneaks, and all the neighbor kids would get together, and we'd have more fun playing these old-fashioned games that they don't play anymore. No, they've got TV instead. But we used to have more fun, and then the curfew. Remember from down right below us, the light plant there would sound off at 9 o'clock, the curfew, and then we all had to go to bed. So that was a sign. When that 9 o'clock curfew blew, boy, you had to get inside and go. You couldn't be outside after 9 o'clock, and it was right below us. So boy, it really made a lot of noise at our place. And then I remember that the dirt that we used to get from that smokestack, from your mother would hang out her wash, and then the light plant, and down on Steel Street. And then we always enjoyed the Albanians around the neighborhood there, and always went over to their church for Easter and
Christmas.
Yeah, they'd walk around the church at Easter time. The Greeks always walked around the church at midnight 3 times in the procession. Good Friday it was, Good Friday night. And we'd go over there and get in on there, walk around with them. And but they were special, very, very special.
They were special people.
Very special people, the Constantines. And I know Daddy often talked of, he needed money at one time, and Tom Constantine loaned him the money, and Daddy says he never wanted me to put it down on paper or anything, you know. He just, you know, here you take the $200 or what it is, and Dad says he didn't want a note or a loan, you know, written. It was a mouth agreement, and that's all they needed between the two of them, and that's how they trusted each other. And he couldn't speak English very good, but but they had a wonderful relationship with them, very close relationship with all those Albanians. And all their kids were the same age as all our kids, only they kept going. They had 8 or 9, and we just had 6. But
okay, if you had one thing that is foremost in your mind when you think of your mother, what would it be?
Well, looking back, I can't think of anybody having a more loving, compassionate, understanding person. She understood that people made mistakes, and that did things they weren't supposed to do, and that she was forgiving. It just wasn't like.
I don't remember her ever really getting mad, do you?
No.
All she had to do was just look at you cross, but she never yelled. I mean, I don't remember her ever yelling or giving a spanking or. Now maybe you remember that, but I was spoiled because I was the baby. But I don't remember her ever getting mad and she just sort of give you a dirty look, and then you knew you did wrong. And boy, you straightened up. All she had to do was she just kind of looked mad, but otherwise she never got mad. And I felt that I lost my best friend.
Did you remember at the next wedding when Hank put Don in charge of the punch bowls? One was alcoholic, one was non-alcoholic, and Don kept tasting the punch, and he got deathly sick and heaved all over the back seat of my car. And you were very upset.
Yes.
With my mother cooling the cucumber, he's just made a mistake, and it's going to be all right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Yeah,
that
she
was my,
was.
yeah.
She never. She wasn't unusual.
Yeah. And it had to be to put up with us and raise 6 children.
Yeah, and to
and
have
work.
the patience.
And work.
Yeah,
you know,
and have the patience. With all
she
this.
sewed all our own clothes. I had my first bought suit when I was 12 years old.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
A very good seamstress.
Yeah.
She sewed all my clothes, and I felt like I was really very well dressed because she sewed up my clothes just like that. She was a wonderful seamstress, and sewed a lot. But
You want to start out the thing?
I remember. Well, of course, I would say spiritual. I think, don't you? Dad was.
Yeah, he his life was his church.
Right.
And
doing for others.
Yeah.
He gave away. I mean, I think he gave away all the time. I mean, and that's why he never had anything when he died. I think he was too good to people because he was always giving them meat if they couldn't afford it. That was fine. He gave them meat and very, very generous. I think. Don't you think so?
Generous, hardworking.
Yeah.
And
a good provider for
right.
us. Mm-hmm.
And he loved his family.
Yeah.
And we are a lot because of our parents. I feel too.
We're very blessed to have the parents that we had.
Yeah.
They were. We were. I think they were strict. I mean, Dad was strict. Mother wasn't, but Dad was more strict with us. But
They were brought up in a black and white philosophy of life, you know, things that were right or wrong,
yeah.
good or bad, sinful or not sinful.
Mm-hmm.
And as you get older, you know there are shades of gray in most everything. we weren't well-to-do, but we were, I would think, middle class. In the whatever you draw the
we
line.
were the first ones to have the telephone and the first ones to have the electric refrigerator and and all the modern conveniences.
Yeah.
So Daddy saw that we had. I think we everybody when they wanted to. They all came over to our house to use our telephone. If we were the only ones in the neighborhood to have a phone at the time, everybody had to come to our house. And we had help. Mother we had people stay with us and hired help. The cars would go out into the ditch, and Ethel go, whoa, that was a close
Well,
one.
he was, I think, beginning to suffer from a little Parkinsonism and
Yeah.
little
But boy, Ethel and I, we'd ride in the...
hardening of the arteries,
Yes.
like I am now up in the
Yeah.
head, you know. And his common response was, they can see me.
Yeah, right. They gotta look out for me, you know. I don't have to. So boy, we'd pass a car, and Ethel and I'd sit in the back seat, and we'd pass a car, and just as he got his nose ahead of the other car, he'd turn in, and the other car would sail off into a ditch or somewhere to avoid getting
Well,
getting hit.
it was remarkable that they didn't have the
I
accident.
know it, I can't believe it. But they gotta look out for me. As long as he got just a little bit ahead of the car, in he'd turn and they'd swerve off the roads and Ethel go, phew!
Well, actually, I don't think they have any instructions, you know.
Oh no, they never took a driver's test or anything, no. They just got in the car and drove. And,
ran from Jamestown to Sheffield. Remember meeting him at the trolley, and he'd have Sunday dinner with us, and my mother would have me tied up, long clothesline, between the trolley tracks and the railroad tracks. And Uncle Carl thought it was terrible to think I was tied up, and Mother tried to explain to him that I was always running away. So I thought it was wonderful to think he'd untied me from this clothesline for a walk. And I always looked forward to his coming for Sunday dinner. I always had a little gift for me. It probably would be a shiny penny, or it might have been a piece of candy.
Now, why would he have settled in Austin, Pennsylvania?
Because of the lumbering industry, and he left Sweden because they had a feudal system at that time where there were big landowners, and you worked for these landowners from the time that you were able to walk in some capacity or other. The boys, as they became young men, kept on working at this particular farm, and the girls, when they became there, running a boarding house for these lumber people. And my mother, after losing one of her babies, used to make as many as 40 pies a day and 3 bushels of donuts. And these lumber would come in for a meal, and Mother would say, now, do you want apple pie, or do you want cherry pie, or berry pie, whichever was? Oh, I'll have a piece of each. She was probably in her 20s at that time.
And then, so your dad and my dad both worked there, or went there. Where did Dad stay when he was in Austin? With Ada?
I'm not sure. I have an idea of being a single man, and she had this boarding house that perhaps he did stay there.
How long was he in Austin, do you know?
Oh, I'm just trying to think back with my dad there. Leaving when I was 3 years old. That was 1906. Probably left about the same time. I think they all lost their jobs at this, in the woods and in this factory.
Where would they have gone from there?
Jamestown, many of them settled, in East Jamestown in particular, and what we call Sweet Hill, too.
Now, did he go, now, C.S., did he go from Austin, do you think, to Sheffield?
I never had heard that he was in Sheffield. You said he had a restaurant there? I think I still have a picture of him where he broke an arm or got it cut so
Yeah,
badly.
do you have that?
I think I still have it.
Because
Oh,
I
it's the
can't find
office
it.
looking
I know
thing. These great big pins sticking out, and he had his hand like this, of course, and
I know, and they took pictures
yeah,
of
I
it.
took pictures of it. I don't know how long he was handicapped that way, but I can remember that, and I'm sure that was one of the pictures I saved out from my mother's collection.
And that was in Sheffield?
Yeah, he got his arm.
Is it a meat market down there?
No,
No,
in the
he
sawmill.
wasn't in that then.
He was, that was in the sawmill at, in Sheffield, right? I know, put it, yeah.
Breaking up rumbling with your children.
Oh, it ran right through his shoulder, yeah. And at the time, they didn't have the
They
sophisticated
didn't have,
doctors.
they
so
didn't have
they-
hospitals either, and very few doctors around.
So I think this they said considering, you know, the way, the handmade thing that they stuck in there was just kind of a pin they put in there to hold his arm together.
Well, they look more like these meat skewers that you had, like when you fix them, rolled roast. A large one, you know, they're, the pins were, yeah, about this big around, I'd say, and quite long, probably about that long.
Bloodsuckers. You used to have
Then,
Harvey's carries and bloodsuckers.
Bloodsuckers?
Yes,
Okay,
that's
true.
right. When, I can't remember when he decided to go in the meat business. Of course, he learned the meat cutting trade in Sweden.
Yes.
He left the farm and lived with these people in Alingsås, the next largest city, and learned the trade there. So then he took it up in Jamestown, and the first market I remember his having was on Cross Street.
Yes.
Cross and Second there, in the back of that brick building. My dad used to work for him on Saturdays, and through that we'd get a roast that would last us all week, or a chicken. That was my dad's pay. Isn't that cute?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, streetcar I had a long walk from where we lived on Moser Street to the streetcar. Take the streetcar up and get off at that corner, walk over and up those cement steps to that little bit of a mark, and take home, because those days Mother wouldn't think of cooking on Sunday, could help it. The roast or the chicken, whichever it was, had to be done on Sunday or Saturday, and then warmed up on Sunday.
Now there was the market across street, and then
On Cross Street in Jamestown.
and then
He was running it alone. Apparently owned it then.
this would have been about. You have any idea of what when?
Well, we lived in Faulkner 1911 through 18. No, 19 it was. We moved uptown. Well, I was old enough, so my mother trusted me to go. I probably was at least 8 years old. That would be around 1916, 17, I would say.
And where was his market next? Do you recall? From Cross
City market.
City
Yeah,
Market.
the old public market. They had a big business. Everybody called him CS.
Baptist Carlson.
Baptist Carlson East.
Oh, Baptiste Carlson.
Yeah.
Yeah, Carlson. Because there was a C.P. Carlson that had a, wasn't he a meat man too?
No,
No, not him.
no.
Might have
CP
been
wasn't a meat man.
Might have been another Carlson.
CP Carlson.
And Mr. Lindblom had the stall,
Spartak Carlson.
Svarte Carlson. Black Carlson?
Carlson.
Or dark hair then, huh?
Yes.
I remember Rosequist had the cheese place down there
Yes, they accept the meat, eggs.
with an axe, huh? Just had a one meat block, didn't they?
Yes.
Well, you know, my husband used to work for your dad. I didn't know that was the guy that was working for them at that time, of course.
Yeah, I know that.
I'll tell you a good one. I said I'd never marry a greasy old meat man, because my dad would come home and he'd smell raw meat. But Dick never said. He was so fussy about his bathing and changing his clothes.
So was Sandberg.
Rayburn?
So was Sandberg.
Sandberg, yeah. Well, that was his Waterloo, and he took Sandberg in business with him. And that's what my mother said, you get him in there, and just won't run. Well, he knew nothing about the meat business. Dad had gotten his training through your dad, and then Louis Peterson helped Dad out, too.
Yes, he really was.
And he, in turn, was an uncle of Sid Covey I was talking about.
Well, then how did Dad get into business with Dick then? Dad was down at City Public Market.
Yeah, and Dick worked for him. His father used to come in and sell butter and eggs at the market there to someone, Rosequist probably. Then he'd go around and peddle on Saturdays, different private homes, while Henry and Dick took confirmation at the Mission Church. You know, horse and buggy those days, summer and winter alike. We went to confirmation those days, I think 2 years, wasn't it? But otherwise, they never joined the church because they never could get down. The good old days, huh? But you know what their dad did? Sunday morning, he was one of the first people in Jamestown to own the car, I'm sure. It was a 7-passenger Ford, open. Remember, with the isinglass curtains and the kerosene headlamps? Who could forget that? Now the kerosene lanterns would go out and the isinglass curtains, and you got a heavy snowstorm or a rainstorm, you'd have to hurry up, and there was no zippers in those days, of course. They had some sort of a buckle thing, yeah, you turn in those
I
holes.
remember that.
You remember too?
I don't remember that.
Well, anyhow, CS was always so good at rounding up children for Sunday school at the old Swedish Baptist Church, or Chandler Street Baptist Church. His children got left behind. Remember that? He'd go all over town, get them to Sunday school, come back and get you kids, but your mother never had time to go. She had to be home Sunday dinner and have that on the table when you came home, plus anybody that your dad would ask for a Sunday dinner. I don't know how she ever did it. Of course, she was constantly baking bread and biscuits. I know that when Stanley was killed that time, Mother had gone over to the house and she had biscuits and bread rising, and Mother took care of that, you know, and did up the dishes.
Stanley,
Yeah, that was sad. That was so many years ago now. How old would Stanley have been?
they paid it for they constantly paid for the boys, and
That was thanks to Dr. Rosane. He wanted Stanley to bring his meat out to him. He had several packages, and instead of piling the meat in from the curbside, he'd gone around to put the meat in. And traffic wasn't that heavy those days, but a car happened to come along, and he
blew his shirt off.
door handle punctured his chest.
Oh, I didn't know that.
The shirt all opened and swinging around.
Oh, what was it, the car got caught on his, he opened the door?
He opened the car door and was putting the meat packages on the floor in the back of Dr. Rosane's car.
Oh,
This
honest?
car came along before Stan got a chance to move. And you see, the streets weren't so wide those days either. And it knocked him against the car, so the door handle entered his chest. So he died almost suddenly, I understand. That was the first funeral I ever went to that I ever heard a minister say, "That isn't Stanley over there. That's just his body. Stanley has already gone to heaven to be with the Lord." I have never forgotten that, and that was Reverend Ed Stan. And that gave me a different outlook entirely on death.
Yeah.
Well, that's beside the point, isn't it?
You're
You're not-
much part of the family.
Oh, you haven't been recording all this, have you?
Absolutely.
Oh, my God.
But, well then I think it's, you were telling about how your Dick got into,
Well, it was shortly after World War I was over. Dick, or Hilding as he was christened, had been working on the railroad tracks and then helping out on the farm. That's how he got out of the service at that time. And then when armistice was declared, they just didn't need this extra track help. So one Saturday, his grandpa was going in the rounds with his butter and eggs. He stopped at the public market, and he knew from CS from Austin. The Rockman family and the Carlsons were all friends in Austin, come to find out. So then he just worked for your dad for a while. And I think your dad said that he decided that he would start a little market on the south side of Jamestown. Would Dick like to run it? And up until that point, Dick was not a partner. He was working for your dad. But your dad had some expenses of some kind, and he said to Dick, "I'm willing to sell the business to you for $1,400. And that was after we were married. So he came home and he says, "Can we raise that kind of money?" And I said, "Well, we don't have it, you know that as well as I do, but we'll get it somehow or other." There was no one we could go to. We went to the Bank of Jamestown, the old Swedish American National Bank.
I remember that.
And I knew quite a few of the people on the board, and so I told them what the situation was, and we got that loan. Those days it was only 3%, I believe it was, we paid. That was a lot different. I had to pay 17% to finish paying for my place down in Florida.
Well,
So that's how Dick got his start. He worked there alone for a long time, and I used to bring down there
Where
Saturday
was it?
dinners. Foot Newland.
Oh, Fort Newland.
It's no longer there. It's been
No.
torn down because of the new highway coming through there.
So he bought that. Weren't they in partnership for a while on the one across the
No,
street? Oh.
no, Dick just worked when he wasn't
You were down
around.
there, Henry, weren't you?
Yeah, you
Was
worked
he
there.
sick? Kind of sick.
Yeah, he was sick
Yes.
there for a long time. Remember, Gladys, you took time off from college and went out to Arizona one year to see if that would help your dad, and I think one year California. Was it?
Well, no, we
And
took
you went
that
to
year
Florida.
off there. Yeah, you went to Florida to see, but that didn't help
And
either.
finally, one year, my dad spent some time with him in Kane, Pennsylvania. That helped somewhat.
I remember that.
Yeah, he not only
Yeah.
had asthma and what was the other breathing sickness that he had? Your lungs get congested. Hay fever.
Oh, hay fever.
Asthma and hay fever both.
Yeah, I forgot about that, but they did go down to Keene to see if that would help him. Did he stay there for a while? Or?
Oh, a couple of weeks, something like
Yeah, I
that,
think
during
so.
the height of what they call the ragweed
Pollen,
season.
yeah,
Yeah, and then from there, your mother tried to take care of him, and then he was in this nursing home on Forest Avenue. Hillside, wasn't it called? It was run by the Hoyles, and they were teachers at Lakewood when I taught there. And then they went into that business, which surprised me no end.
Yeah, but he was just there while Mother was sick. Mother had pneumonia or something,
Yeah,
and she was sick, so they
She
put
was
him there.
overly tired from taking care of him. And
And
it
then
was
she took
through
him back
your
again.
dad that we started to travel. Your dad said to Dick one Sunday afternoon we went to visit him. That was when they lived on the second floor where you're living now. Said, travel when you're young and feel good. Don't wait until you're older.
Good advice.
From 1960 on through 73.
Well, Dad loved to travel. He was always going on trips.
He liked to drive a car.
You know?
Tell me a story.
So I tell you a story about, well, one Sunday morning, we had to be ready by 4 o'clock in the morning in Faulkner for Uncle Carl to come down and pick my mother and Dad and I up in this Ford with isinglass curtains. It was cold that morning, and it was in the spring of the year. We went to Fort Niagara to visit, well, he would be my double cousin, Henry Carlson. And we felt so sorry for him. We asked his commanding officer when it was time for supper, because all they gave him was a hunk of rye bread with a piece of beef left over from Sunday dinner. That's all the boys were getting that night for supper, and water. So we took him into Niagara Falls and found a restaurant and gave him a good meal and brought him back again. Well, then by that time it was pitch dark. Those days you didn't have the road signs that you have nowadays. And the kerosene lamps gave out on us, and the road felt terribly bumpy. So my dad said to C.S., or Uncle Carl, probably better get out and see what's wrong with the road. We were on railroad tracks. And by that time, it was after midnight. And imagine, none of us drove except C.S. And Dad got out and helped him turn the car around and relight these kerosene lamps. And get back on a dirt road. And we didn't know whether we were going north, east, south, or west. And there was no one around to tell us. And another time...
Did you ever get home then?
Oh, got home about 4 o'clock in the morning. I think my dad slept two hours before he had to report to work at the Jamestown Mantle Company, which was down the tracks a piece. He used to walk the tracks to get there. And of course, those days he only had... I don't know whether I can tell it with a straight face or not. Well, this is one Thanksgiving, and I was probably, I believe I was in high school by that time, probably a freshman in high school. And we were asked Uncle Carl's and Aunt Edith for Thanksgiving after church. Well, we got there after church, and Andy had the table set and the turkey in the oven and whatnot, had everything under control. Well, the boys, Henry and Philip, the two older members of the family, had each gotten a rocking horse the Christmas before, apparently. And they were rocking away for all they were worth. Well, Henry disappeared for a while. And you know where we found him? He was out in this little building in back of the house. It was supposed to be a garage, but I guess it was used more to make cord and things like that, wasn't it, years ago? Gotten a hold of a hatchet, was chopping up his horse to find out what was inside the horse, what made it work. Remember that? Yeah, I don't think Philip did that, though, but I can remember. Then at the same time, your mother was nursing, let's see, would it be Ruth? Is Ruth next in line?
Yeah.
Yeah. She was sitting in a rocking chair in the kitchen by the sink, and I had never seen this happen in all my life before. She'd taken one breast out, and she was nursing Ruth. And my dad went over and said something to her, and she picks her breast up and squirts it in my dad's face. Oh, never having seen anyone's breast exposed before, I just stood there in shock, naturally, and I was all eyes. And I was watching that besides double cousin Henry was in the living room, and he didn't know that.
Hello.
Well, you know where you're living now, in that apartment.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's still the same way or not, but
Oh, sure is, yeah.
you
What
have the
time?
high wall there, and then these posts.
Pick you up at 5:30.
Well, I
right?
saw Henry
Okay.
giving his
We'll be
current
there.
girlfriend a wristwatch
Thank you.
for Christmas that year, and he thought nobody else saw, but he wanted everybody to see him give this girlfriend of his a watch, because that romance never materialized.
Is that true, Henry? Did you really beat on your horse like that?
Oh, how they would ride those horses. And you know, we got Tim a rocking horse, and third floor was on Faulkner Street. Was that East Jamestown someplace? Those days, nobody had anything. Really, we made everything. I know my mother made pillowcases for every family that she had embroidered and crocheted on her boat. And we didn't have wrapping paper those days. My dad would call it sissy paper. Tissue paper, white tissue paper. Oh, that was a thing. Now we wrap in funny papers when we get together to save money, and we also use aluminum foil. I don't know what I'm going to wrap. John's.
I am Cornelia, and I was a niece to your mother, Edith. And I didn't know her before I came here to America, 1953. And I stayed with her, and she told me some about her time when she was a young girl and when she come over to this country. And she was 16 years old and came over 1900. And she come with a minister. She worked for a minister in Sweden. And they asked her to help with the children when they were moving to America. And when she come over here, they told her to go out and have a job, for they couldn't afford to have her. So that's why she started to work in families. And she didn't have much money at all. She made about $1.50, $2 a week. And she worked very hard. And in fact, she started to save money to go back to Sweden and see her parents, her parents. And she had saved up $500, and the bank went bankrupt, and she lost it all. And she said, there was my trip to Sweden, and I never wish to go back anymore. But she talked a lot of her childhood and all the sisters and brothers. She was the second one in the family, and her brother William, he died when he was 20 years old.
Now, I never even heard of him before.
Yeah, and then Edith was the next. So she was, then there was eight more children. One died when was a little. No, he didn't. That was William. He died.
William is the one that died.
Yeah.
See, I don't remember him at all, or talking
No.
about him at all. How old was he when he died?
20 years old.
20 years old?
Yeah, 20 years old.
Hmm.
He's in that picture you have.
No.
Yes, you have that family picture, don't you?
Yeah, but he isn't in there.
Oh, yeah.
Well, then what's the next order? Mother, and then who was next?
Carl in Sweden.
Oh, Carl. Okay.
And he was the only one that stayed in Sweden. All the others came over here. And
Yeah.
farmer come over here.
And Carl was the one that was a furniture maker
Yeah,
too, just
furniture.
like his
He
dad.
made furniture, and he also made caskets.
Oh, that was right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he had a very good business. But you know, they were a big family, and
I mean, Grandpa made caskets.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a big family, and farmer was kind of weak, and they had an awful time with all the boys and girls
Mm-hmm.
to keep them in order.
Oh, sure. And
So
where did they live? Where did
they lived in Västerås, Sweden, and they had their own home, and their name was Hemmet, the home.
The home was named
Yeah.
Hammett. Mm-hmm.
And I was there when I was, now, 1917, 6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So then my dad come back from America, and we all went home to see Grandma and Grandpa,
Mm-hmm.
and they lived there, and we were all together. And after that, in the fall, our grandpa died, 60 years old.
What did he die from?
He had an lung
TB?
ammonia,
Oh,
yeah.
pneumonia.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then they come over, 1918. They came over, our grandma and the three. They were home. Stein and Ruth and Esther came over
Mm-hmm.
and stayed with her.
And then they stayed with my mother
Yeah,
until.
stayed with your mother.
Yeah.
So the most of the family was over here. There was only Carl in Västerås and my dad.
Mm-hmm.
They stay in Sweden.
Mm-hmm.
All the others were here.
Well, when did they move to Smedjebacken?
I think your grandma was born in Smedjebacken, Dalarna.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was born there. And they live in two places. They live in Dalarna and in Grängesberg.
Mm-hmm.
So my grandpa was from Grängesberg and my grandma was from Uberget in Dalarna.
Mm-hmm.
And they lived in Smedjebacken. My dad is born in Smedjebacken, and I think she was too,
Yeah, I think.
born in Smedjebacken. Yeah.
But that's not in Dalarna, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Dalarna.
That's in Dalarna.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So,
And then he was a furniture maker,
yeah,
Grandpa?
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
he was. And your grandma stayed home, of course. They all lived in Sweden.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And you said he did pretty good?
but I could understand he made pretty good. My dad used to say he made pretty good money. He had a little shop and had some workers under him.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad was supposed to start, but he was no good at that. So he got to be, if he don't like to work in the shop, I'm going to ask a tailor, he said. So you are going to learn to sew.
Oh.
But Carl was the only one. They were home in the shop
Yeah.
and work.
And he still has Grandpa's dining room suit. I saw it when we were in Sweden.
Yeah. He had very,
That they
very
made.
nice furniture.
Mhm.
He did very good.
Yeah.
But he moved to Västerås,
Mm-hmm.
so they live there.
Well, now, I think Gunnar mentioned something about that. He used to sell the furniture even right from the house? Gunnar had mentioned something about if somebody wanted furniture and it wasn't made, he'd come in the house and sell the furniture that they had in the house.
That could happen. I think he made most of them in orders.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
they order from him different things they like to have.
Mm-hmm.
So I had one of this bureau.
Mm-hmm.
What do they call it?
Chest.
Chest.
Mm-hmm.
I had a chest that he had made,
Mm-hmm.
and Ruth, our aunt
Mhm.
Ruth, she got it from her dad.
Oh, did she?
He made it for her.
Mm-hmm.
So she gave me that when she went to America.
Mm-hmm. Now, why did Mother come to America?
She worked for this
that's
family
right.
that was a minister,
That's right.
and they talked her in to go over and help with the children.
Mm-hmm.
And she thought she would work for them when she come here,
Mm-hmm.
but they just told her to go out and...
Where did she go? What was her destination? Jamestown? How did she get to Jamestown?
I imagine they went to Jamestown. I never heard anything else. I think he come here, the minister.
Oh, is that how she got to Jamestown?
Yeah, I think so.
Mm-hmm. And now, what did Mormor think of her coming to America, the first girl leaving?
Oh, they thought there was a better future for the children.
Mm-hmm.
So
Why was that? What was bad in Sweden at the time?
oh, there was very hard for young people. They didn't have very much choice, the girls. They had to work in families. That was almost all they could do. There was no industry or nothing they could go on.
Mm-hmm.
Some, like Sigrid, she worked in a store before she come here
Mm-hmm.
in Borlänge.
Mm-hmm.
But there wasn't very much choice. My mother worked in a family too. And Edith and my mother, they were very good friends. She come here 1904,
Mm-hmm.
and they were very good friends. And they went on to the station, railroad station, and met my dad when he come over here.
Oh, that's how your mother got to meet your dad?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. So she met him.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea how Mother happened to meet my dad?
No. I imagine they met in church, didn't they?
Yeah, I think so.
I imagine.
Mm-hmm.
So at that time, the minister in the church come down to the station and met the Swedes when they came from Sweden,
Mm-hmm.
and invited them to the church and told them he was going to help them to get a job and get a place to stay. So that was very good for the immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
He was so concerned about the young people, that somebody took care of them so they don't get in bad company.
Would he know when a train came in then
Yeah.
from Sweden?
They know when they came from Sweden. You know, they know when the boats come in.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Grandma Carlson, my Grandma Carlson, and my grandfather Carlson both came through Boston Harbor, and then to Worcester, Massachusetts. Do you know of any particular reason why they would come into the Boston
I
Harbor?
have no idea why they came there. For my mom, she come into New York,
Mm-hmm.
and they all immigrants had to go through Ellis Island.
Well, no, there was another port. Boston was the other ports, and that's...
There must have been some.
Yeah.
They took them. There was many they immigrate. They
Mm-hmm.
stay in Boston.
Yeah, in Worcester. But we didn't have any family in Worcester or anything, did we? Worcester, Massachusetts?
Joseph lived in Boston.
Boston. But when he first came to America,
No, we didn't have any.
we didn't have any reason
No.
why she would go to Worcester.
Say, my mom, she had her aunts and uncles in Jamestown.
Mm-hmm.
That's why she came here.
Mm-hmm.
From
Well, but Mother would have been here. Maybe Mother knew some of your mother's aunts and
No.
uncles, and no?
she did. Yeah, she know them here because she was a good friend of my mom.
Yeah.
But otherwise, they were not related.
No. Mm-hmm.
So
So she came to Jamestown with this, supposedly with this minister. The minister said, "Gee, I don't have a job for you. Look elsewhere."
Yeah.
Then what did she do?
yeah, she worked in a family.
You-
She like they all did. And under
Mhm.
the bad years during Depression, she worked for nothing more and board, room and board, for they couldn't afford to have any help. So they told if she liked to stay in that family, she could do it, but she couldn't have any salary.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a bad time for the girls.
Yeah.
But then she met your dad, of course, and get married. And
But they always lived where they worked, right?
yeah, I think so.
They lived in the house.
Oh yeah, they always
Yeah.
lived.
They always lived there.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
they did.
Yeah.
So
But, okay. Do you know anything about, I was trying to think, anything that she liked to do over in Sweden when she was small? Well, what did they do for fun over there?
as fast as she quit school, they only have 6 years in school.
6.
Yeah, and they started when they were 7, and they have 6 years. And after that, when they quit that school, they just went out to work.
Okay.
They work for farmers and they work in families. So that's why she worked for this minister.
Oh, I see. She had worked for him before
worked
she
for
came
him.
here.
Yeah, she worked there, see.
Oh, before she came
Yeah.
over here.
So
Oh, I see.
she was only 16. No?
Mm-hmm.
She worked there for a few years. That was the place she had.
Mm-hmm.
That's why she come here.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the parents thought it was a good thing for her to go over here and make living.
Now, were they always Baptists, or what kind of religion did they
They
have?
were Baptist. Our grandparents were Baptist.
And how did they happen to become Baptists in a Lutheran? Because everybody is Lutheran otherwise in Sweden.
Yeah, but you know, the Baptist church in Sweden, they started 1854, 1848.
1848, the Baptist church
1848,
started.
they had the first, they were baptized.
Mm-hmm.
So they were belonged to the Baptist.
Did Mormor meet Grandpa at the Baptist church, or
I don't know.
you don't know about?
No, I
You don't know
don't.
anything about their
No,
sisters or brothers
no,
or anything?
I don't know much about them themselves. The only thing I know how the children work.
Was it a big church there in where they lived? A big Baptist church?
I don't think so.
There wasn't many Baptists.
No, there was just a few.
Yeah.
And they have a hard time, you know, they put them in prison and they were not accepted from the state church.
Mm-hmm.
So they have a bad time. There was a reason why many come over here. They like freedom for church.
Oh, I see.
They couldn't have any meetings like they have here.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why they came over.
Was a particular problem during the 1900s, the draft? Did some men come over? Did they leave Sweden for fear of becoming drafted in the army?
Some did. Some did because they had to stay in there for a whole year, and it was pretty rough on the boys.
What
So
year
some
did?
like to escape.
What year would how old would a person be to join be drafted? You know,
About 19.
19.
And then they were in for 1 year.
Yeah, they were in for 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
So I imagine my dad and Joseph. So my dad was only 17 when he came over,
Mm-hmm.
and Joseph was. My dad came first, And then Joseph and Sigrid came the same time.
Okay.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
And they are four of them, they have a household together.
Oh, dear.
And Edith was the one that should stay home and cook for the other three that were working. And they had so much fun. They never laughed so much as they did. They invited all the youngsters to come home to them. You know, there were four
Sure.
of them. And they really went bankrupt for, you know, all the things the three of them could make. They're partying and they spend. So finally, Edith had to go out and work. And there was, everybody went their own way.
Yeah.
But they do live together, four of them, at first.
Do you know where that was?
No, I don't know where it was, but it was here in Jamestown, and it was the most happy time in their life.
Now, who were the four again?
The four was Edith and Sigrid, and my dad, David, and Joseph.
Mm-hmm.
So they all lived together
Yeah.
when they're first in Jamestown. Well,
When they first came over here.
isn't
Three
that
of them work, and one was home to cook for the other three. But they laughed, and they had so much fun, so they was just crazy, all of them.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't make it very long.
so then your mom would have gone out and worked
Yeah.
and lived in the homes with the people whom she worked with or worked
Is
for.
that it? She went out and worked.
Yeah, yeah, she took work in a family.
Mm-hmm.
Now, who were the two families? Do you remember? Kent, was it
I
Kent?
don't know what family.
Yeah, I
it is.
think Kent was one of them, but I'm not sure. She talked about the Kents, but I don't know. I can't remember. But
And then they get married. Edith get married, and my mom and dad get married, and Sigrid get married, and Joseph, he moved to Boston, I think. He lived with my mom and dad at first.
Oh, did he?
Yeah,
When they
but
first
you
got
know,
married.
that was pretty hard for he kind of lived it up.
Yeah.
So they had an awful time with him. But he lived there when I was born.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I was born on Barker Street, 88.
88 Barker.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you went back to Sweden after 3 years, right?
Yeah. 1914.
Mm-hmm.
Went back to Sweden.
And then you were coming back here to help Mother, right? You stayed with Mother for a couple weeks.
No, I came here to visit.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was here, your dad was sick and your mom didn't have any help.
Mm-hmm.
She had somebody that quit.
Yeah, I remember
Yeah,
that. Uh-huh.
and Harold and somebody else had come over. I think there was Ruth or some. Come over and asked me if I would go over there for a couple of weeks and help your dad. So I did. And I'm so thankful I did, because your mom and I had such a good time. And she told me all about the family and all about her life from the beginning. But your dad was very sick.
And that was in 53, right?
53, yeah.
Yeah. Then you went back and you were coming back to...
Yeah, and I
Stay
tried to do whatever I could for your dad, and he said to me, when he sit there in his chair, he said, "Oh, I wish you come to America when I could take you all around in the car," he said, "and show you all the nice places. It was too bad you come so late." And I tried to do things I would think would be good. I tried to give him massage for his feet and things, and he said, "You know, you are a better nurse than Ruth." She don't do these things to me. So I tried to do my best for him, but I felt so sorry for him. And for your mom, of course, that was a hard time for her too. and they asked me to stay longer, but I had my apartment and my work and everything. I couldn't stay, but many times afterwards I regret I didn't try to stay because he died
Yeah.
not long after that.
And then you came back in 4 years later, right?
57,
Left.
yeah. I come back. And she was so excited about the wedding.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and the first summer we were married, they came out to Illinois, your mom and Sigrid and Eric drove the car out there, and they stayed with me for a few days. And we had such a good time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, what did she do for the wedding? Did she,
Oh, they helped, to get everything arranged. There was some they had to help with to
yeah, I know.
the reception or
Yeah.
a little bit. And of course, my mom's cousin Hetty Brunberg,
Mhm.
she was the one that was who had the things too and
Mhm.
helped. And Sigrid.
Mhm. Yeah, so they had a good
Mhm.
time.
And Gladys.
Yeah.
She was the organizer.
The bridesmaid.
Hon lärde mig hur det går, vad att göra. So there was a good time.
Now, can you remember anything? Did your dad ever say anything about their childhood? What kind of bringing up they had, or how their parents were? Or?
My grandpa was very strict.
Mhm.
He wanted the boys and all the kids to obey everything. I mean, they could never open their mouth and say anything. In fact, they said they had a sofa in the kitchen, one of these wood-made
Mhm.
sofa, and when he come in the door, they all sit on the sofa in a row, and the mother would tell everything bad they had done. And
Yeah.
if he thought there would be some punishment, he would do that. So they were scared, really scared of their dad,
Mhm.
because he was the one that did it.
He disciplined them.
Yeah,
Was she strict or no?
no,
No.
she wasn't, but she did told about things
Mhm.
that make him mad.
Mhm.
So I mean, she was not really honest in that way, for she kind of helped the kids around, and then when he come home, she told about the trick they had done.
Mhm.
But they were a little bit scared, like they were in Sweden.
Yeah.
They were bringing up the children to be good kids, and that was the way they raised them.
Mhm. Mhm.
So,
And of course, he would never work in the kitchen or anything
Oh,
like
no.
that. No.
oh no, and Grandma was very weak, sick all her life, and she fainted when she was running around in the home and fainted, and my dad one time, he threw milk over her because there was no water in the house.
Mhm.
So she wake up and she said, "What in the world are you doing, boy? Are you throwing the milk out?"
Yeah.
So there is my dad has some stories about these things from his childhood, but he was only 12 years old when he came out from home.
Oh, he was only 12 when he left home.
He started to sew when he was 12 years.
Oh my.
And he came home on Sunday every week. He got Sunday afternoon off. Oh, and they had a car, and I remember they sent a picture from the home there on Chapman Street.
Mhm.
And you were all standing on the porch, and there was the Ford in front of it. And you sent it to Sweden, and my mom and dad thought, oh, they really have it good now.
Yeah.
They have all these things. They were all poor from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have more, but they did good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they all did good afterwards. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
They were very good workers. They
Did
were honest people.
did Edith sew? Did she sell what she sewed? Was there any kind of like household?
Oh yeah, she was sewing clothes for the children. She was a good sewer.
Oh yeah, she used to sew all my
Yeah,
clothes.
she made.
Yeah.
She made everything.
But did she learn how to sew in Sweden before she came over here?
I don't think so.
No.
Oh, they all
sewed.
did a little bit, but they're not really clothes.
Mm-hmm.
They embroidery and did things like that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I know she did a lot of crocheting.
Yeah. Yeah, she
And,
did.
Yeah. But I remember she always, if I needed a dress, you know, for any kind of a party or that, I'd just tell her and she'd sew it and have it ready for me in a
I
in a
still
day or
have
two.
that little thing she crocheted to me.
Oh, do you? Mm-hmm. Yeah, she loved to crochet and sew that. She was a good seamstress. Mm-hmm.
But she never actually she didn't sell the stuff. She just
No,
did it for them.
no,
Yeah.
We both cry. I remember so well when I went up to say goodbye to her, and we both cried. She was really so dear to me in my heart because she was such a wonderful person. And I never know her before, and we could talk about things. And I could tell her about my family and my dad, and I mean, she wondered many times how they come out, my dad
Sure.
and everybody, so I could tell her just as it was. I didn't need to hide anything,
No.
for we understood each other so well. And we were older too.
Yeah. Cornelia is the oldest cousin on our side of the family,
Yeah.
which I never realized before, but of all the cousins,
Remember that?
she's the oldest.
Yeah, and then Hank is the
Is the next.
next, yeah.
So she's,
So we grew up together,
mhm.
Hank and I mean, we were playing together
When you were little
when
babies, huh?
when we were small, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was only 2 years old.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But, you know, you have something that nobody else has, because you have a title. You're the oldest cousin, the matriarch of our family now. You're the matriarch of our family now. So, well, I don't know. Yeah, she just kind of took it easy and let things come as
And
they...
she kept going, working and cooking and baking. She could stay up long and do
Yeah.
things. She was never fast,
No,
really, but she was even working.
yeah. She just kind of... I remember she always... Dad could never understand why she was always late to go... She was always late, just like I am, to go places, you know. But I think she had everything to worry about, the children and getting them ready and...
But she was like a queen, and she come into the church.
Mhm.
She walked straight, and she was so beautiful in her hat and clothes, and she walked straight up in front because she didn't hear too good.
Yeah. Mhm.
She was just like a queen.
Mhm.
I can see her anytime
Yeah.
in front of me.
She loved to read poetry.
Yeah.
She liked to give readings and read poetry. I know she used
She-
to do that at
she-
Ladies' Aid often.
She was very deep in her thoughts.
Yeah.
She didn't talk much about things. I mean, like some people just talk and talk and talk.
Yeah.
She was very deep. She said something that was really worth things.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, she was.
And we prayed together, and we
Was she musical at all?
No. No talent musically.
no.
Nope.
Didn't sing or?
Nope. Nope. No talent. She loved to read poetry. I remember that. She liked to give readings because they always had it for Ladies' Aid. Give readings, and she enjoyed doing that. And right, but she had no musical ability at all.
Her thoughts was much deeper. There was word on something.
Was she?
There was another other kind. She was more excited.
Yeah.
Talk about things and running and doing things. But David, she just sit there and she was wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
She was.
Was she active in the church?
In the ladies' aid.
Yes. Yeah, she was real active in. The problem was with being the only social life that they had was their church. So they would, the ladies' aid, they used to work so hard when they entertained at ladies' aid to see how many members they could get to.
And your dad was very active in Sunday school.
Yes.
And sometimes they could take the children out for a ride and a picnic out in a park. He did anything for the kids.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
In church.
Yeah, he loved the children.
That's what they told me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it was a terrible thing when he got sick and he couldn't do anything.
Oh, I know it.
He really suffered.
Yeah, because he liked to go,
Yeah,
and he
he
liked
liked
to
to
travel
go,
and
liked to
take
work.
people around. And
Like people, and Harry sit and couldn't walk. That was terrible.
mm-hmm.
Did Grandma Carlson ever talk about Stanley's death?
Yeah.
What did she say?
Yeah, she told how it happened. He was going out with some from the meat market on his bicycle, and some car ran over him.
Did she talk at all about her emotions?
Yeah. That was hard. But it was really, really dear to her. Stanley was. There was the boy that really she felt a lot for. Or because he died.
Yeah.
He died, and then it was a heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
Did she talk about Grandpa Carlson, how he felt after all of this? We're led to believe that really he never was the same after that. Did she ever talk about that?
You mean in the last years?
Well,
And
ever
he
since Stanley died, I was always told that he was never the same after that. Carl.
No, I never heard that.
She
But
never.
I can imagine he blamed himself.
Yeah.
He had told him to do something he didn't used to do. And Stanley was kind of excited about that, and it happens.
Yeah. Well, he was working for Daddy at the time,
Yeah.
and he got killed, and
Yeah.
I think that made Daddy feel
Yeah,
very
I think
bad.
so.
Yeah. Like it was sort of his fault. So. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, you've done a good job, Cornelia.
No, I wish I could remember some.
Well, I think you know more than anybody else.
If I would know there would be an interview, I wouldn't make notes.
Yeah.
That time she told me.
Oh, yeah.
When
You didn't know
I never thought of it.
You didn't
that
know
way.
40 years later.